My name is Judith Ashbrook. I'm 67 years old, and I think I finally understand what loneliness really feels like. It's not the silence that fills the hallways, not the quiet creak of old floors in the middle of the night. Loneliness is realizing that a life full of achievements still left you empty in the places that mattered most. I've been a widow for 10 years now. Sitting alone in my spacious home in North Minneapolis, I often feel that the rooms aren't so much filled with furniture as they are with memories. Some bring me joy. Others sting like paper cuts I thought had healed. And more often than not, I find myself haunted by the thought that in chasing success, I may have missed the most important thing of all. I was a cardiologist at the Mayo Clinic for 35 years. I remember the ambition in my bones when I started, young, determined, one of the very few women in a room full of men. I had to fight to prove I belonged, to be taken seriously. Over time, I earned the respect of my peers and became one of the top specialists in my field. But every step up the ladder came with a cost. And the people who paid the highest price weren't in my hospital. They were in my own home. I met Owen in college. I was studying medicine. He was studying law. We married in our third year. A year into my residency, our firstborn, Ga, was born. 2 years later, our daughter, Marielle, arrived. By then, Owen had already started making waves in corporate law, representing major pharmaceutical companies. Our careers were taking off, his, then mine, and our children were raised more by Rosita, our Filipino nanny, than by either of us. She was with us for 15 years, and during that time, we clung to the idea that we were building a better future for our children. We're doing it for them, Owen would tell me when I came home from a 12-hour shift to find the kids already asleep. He called me D. A single letter, a nickname that mirrored my shrinking presence in our children's lives. I remember one morning vividly. Ga was 9 and playing the lead in his school play. I had promised I would be there. But that afternoon, a patient was rushed in with an acute heart attack. I stayed behind. That night, Ga wouldn't speak to me. For 3 days. I bought him a 10-speed bicycle, an expensive one. He accepted it quietly, but the spark in his eyes never returned. I made a habit of compensation. When I missed birthdays or important events, I made up for it with gifts. For Marielle, I didn't always manage to buy a cake, but I ordered extravagant presents, a trip to Disneyland, gold earrings, an enormous dollhouse. Over time, those gifts replaced presents. They became currency. I thought I was doing what good parents do, providing. What I didn't see was that I was teaching them to equate love with transactions. When Ga and Marielle left for college, we bought their apartments, paid their tuition at top universities, and gave them every possible material advantage. Owen and I told ourselves that we were giving them what we never had. I came from a family of a school teacher and a bus driver. Owen had been raised by a single mother working 2 jobs. We believed we were elevating our children's lives, but in reality, we were absent from them. And then Owen died. A sudden aortic aneurysm. He collapsed in the courtroom. No warnings. No goodbyes. I was 57. A cardiologist with decades of experience, unable to save her own husband from a cardiac rupture. After the funeral, Ga and Marielle stayed a week. Then they returned to their lives. Ga moved to Chicago, managing a pharmaceutical firm. Marielle settled in a Minneapolis suburb, teaching elementary school. They were both married. Ga to Tessa, a former model obsessed with social standing. Marielle to Noel, a quiet accountant who never really spoke unless prompted. I kept working for another 5 years, needing purpose, until retirement forced me to face the silence. Suddenly I had time. Time to think. Time to feel. And time to notice just how little I truly knew my children, or they me. Our house, a grand old Victorian mansion with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a library, and even a conservatory, had always been more of a status symbol than a sanctuary. Now it felt like a museum, cold, excessive, echoing with footsteps of a family long gone. I wandered through its rooms, half expecting to see flickers of the past behind every door. I tried volunteering, gardening, reading. Nothing filled the void. I imagined bonding with my grandchildren, Ga's sons Ethan and Jason, Marielle's daughter Lillian. I pictured museum trips, baking sessions, bedtime stories. But real life didn't follow my imagined script. Visits were rare and calculated. 2, maybe 3 times a year, usually before holidays or important family milestones. And always, they followed a familiar rhythm. Pleasantries, small talk, updates about the kids. Then came the inevitable pivot. Mom, Ethan needs a new laptop for school, Gar would say. The cheapest decent one is $1,000. Mommy, Noel and I are thinking of trading in the car, Mariel would add. You know how many extracurriculars Lillian has. When Owen passed, I inherited not just the house, but his law firm shares, savings, investments. A substantial estate. No one, not even me, knew the exact figure without digging into statements. But my children seemed to assume it was endless, and I never said no. Guilt kept my checkbook open. Old habits told me that money was the way to fix things. You're not going to spend it anyway, Mum, Gar would say, with a tone so casual it pierced me. In public, they painted me as a hero. At restaurants, family gatherings, they introduced me proudly. My mother is a renowned cardiologist. She saved so many lives. But behind closed doors, the tone shifted. One Christmas, I overheard Gar and Tessa in the kitchen. Is your mother going to lecture us about heart health again? Tessa said with annoyance. Just smile and nod, Gar replied. The sooner we get through dinner, the sooner we get the check for tuition. I pretended I didn't hear. I told myself I must have misunderstood. But over time, it became impossible to deny. I saw Mariel roll her eyes when I spoke about my hospital volunteer work. I caught Tessa discreetly wiping her hands after hugging me. I overheard Noel whisper, How much longer do we have to sit here? Last year, on my birthday, I waited all morning for a call. Nothing came. By late afternoon, I gave up. Then the doorbell rang. My children, their spouses, and grandkids stood there with cake and presents. Surprise! Mom! I cried. We drank tea. Laughed. They gifted me a beautiful scarf and a book about medical history. I let myself believe it was genuine. Then Gar casually mentioned they were looking to buy a new car. Could you help with a down payment? He asked, like he was asking for a napkin. I wrote a check for $20,000. He thanked me with the same warmth he might have shown a cashier. And now, here I sit in this grand house, wondering when it all went wrong. When did my children stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as an ATM with a maternal interface? Is this the legacy I built? Was it my own doing? Did I teach them, through years of absence and expensive gifts, that love is measured in dollar signs? Sometimes I wish I could go back. Sit with Gar on the edge of his bed and listen to his day. Help Mariel make a school project. Burn cookies in the oven while we laugh about it. But I can't. Time doesn't offer refunds. All I can do is accept the truth and maybe try to change what time hasn't yet claimed. Yesterday, I discovered something. Something I wish I hadn't. But now that I know, I can't unknow it. It was Tuesday, Gar's day to call. These weekly check-ins had been instituted after a family dinner where Mariel suggested I might be too alone in such a big house. They all held a little summit right there at the table and came up with a plan. Gar calls Tuesdays, Mariel on Fridays. The calls were short, polite, predictable. How are you, Mom? Everything okay? Followed by complaints. And then, another request. But this Tuesday, the phone never rang. And in that silence, I finally heard everything. I began to worry. Was something wrong? I called Gar's number, but he didn't answer. I tried Tessa's phone next. Nothing. Radio silence. Which was strange. Tessa practically lived on her phone. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but the silence felt heavy. It wasn't until 9 p.m., just as I was preparing for bed, that the doorbell rang. Standing on the doorstep were Gar and Tessa. Mom, sorry for the unannounced visit, Gar said, looking more nervous than I'd seen him in years. We were driving by and thought we'd stop in. Driving by. That caught my attention. They live in Chicago, a 6-hour drive from Minneapolis. People don't casually drop in from another state. But I was too surprised, and admittedly, too glad, to see my son to ask any hard questions. While I brewed tea, Gar wandered through the living room, eyes scanning the family portraits on the walls like he was seeing them for the first time. Tessa sank into the couch, immediately absorbed by her phone. Nothing unusual there. How are the kids? I asked, setting down the teacups. Great, Gar replied, a little too quickly. Ethan got top marks in chemistry. And Jason, well, Jason's the same as always. I didn't press for details. Truthfully, I barely recognized Jason and Ethan in the filtered photos they posted online. Their visits had become so infrequent that I sometimes wondered if I'd ever really known them at all. Are you staying long? I asked, watching them carefully. Gar and Tessa exchanged a brief glance. Actually, Mom, we're here on business, Gar began. Tessa got a job offer at a PR agency here in Minneapolis, he added. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased, despite the fact that Tessa had never worked in PR, or anywhere else, for the past 15 years. The idea of having them nearby filled me with hope. Yes, it's a great opportunity, Tessa chimed in, finally lifting her eyes from her screen. But there's one problem: housing. The real estate market is insane. Without hesitation, I offered, you can stay here while you look. That's very generous, Mom, Gar said, sitting beside me. But we've thought of something else. He paused, searching for the right words. This house is too big for you alone. The upkeep, the repairs, the cost. Maybe you should consider something more manageable. I didn't immediately catch on. Are you suggesting I move? Not move, upgrade, Tessa said with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. There are wonderful communities for active retirees, with healthcare, social activities, everything you need. And what would happen to this house? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the heat rising inside me. It could be sold, Gar said simply, as if he were offering to donate an old coat. It's a great time to sell, he added, and the proceeds could be invested. In my new place, I said, finishing the thought for him. Well, yes. First and foremost, of course, Gar replied, then added, but maybe some of it could be used for other things. Like the boys' education. Or, if we decide to move here permanently, maybe a down payment on a house. Mom, you've got it all wrong, he insisted when he saw the look on my face. We're just thinking about what's best for you. For the next hour, they showed me glossy brochures filled with smiling retirees doing yoga or watercolor painting. They spoke of amenities, of safety, of a new chapter. They promised to come back next week with more information. When they left, I sat in silence, the same silence that had become my daily companion since Owen's death. Only now it was louder, pressing against me from all sides. They wanted to sell this house. This house, where Owen and I spent most of our married life. Where Gar and Mariel took their first steps. Where Christmases had been celebrated, tears shed, fights fought, and love, however flawed, had once lived. To them, it was just a financial asset. The next day, I called Mariel. Noel answered. She's at school, he said, but she should be back soon. There was a pause. Then he added, a bit awkwardly, Gar called last night. Said he talked to you. About possible changes. Yes, I replied evenly. Just a suggestion, of course. No one's forcing anything. Something in his voice, too soothing, too measured, put me on edge. Noel, I asked quietly, do you and Mariel think I should move too? A pause. Then, Mariel thinks you'd be better off somewhere with people your own age. Somewhere more manageable. I'm 67, Noel, not 97. Of course, Judith, of course. You're perfectly capable. We're just worried. It's a big house. A lot to handle. That's when worry turned into suspicion. Why this sudden concern? Why now? I decided to test my theory. I called Gar and said I'd been thinking about his suggestion. That I might be open to exploring options. But first, I wanted him and Mariel to come over for the weekend. All of us, as a family. Gar agreed so fast it was almost eager. That Saturday, they arrived. Gar and Tessa from Chicago. Mariel and Noel from the suburbs. The grandchildren didn't come. They had school events. Of course, I cooked lunch. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, steamed vegetables. Iwan's favorites. The conversation was light. Work. Summer plans. The kids. No one mentioned retirement homes. Or selling the house. It hung in the air like a storm cloud, unspoken, but felt. Then, after dessert, I excused myself, saying I needed to rest. Truthfully, I needed time to think, to breathe, to prepare for the discussion I knew was coming. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I felt something shift. A quiet resolve growing in my chest. I wasn't ready to be sold off with the furniture. Not yet. Not like this. I heard them moving into the living room. Their voices drifted upward through the air vent, one of the many old architectural quirks in this century-old house. The same vent that once carried the sound of children's laughter, or the late-night clinks of Owen pouring himself a quiet drink after a long day, now funneled in the cold, mechanical voices of my adult children plotting my removal like some inconvenient relic. She took a bite, Gar said, smugness leaking through his words. I told you she'd say yes. Don't jump to conclusions, Muriel replied, her tone restrained but sharp. She hasn't signed anything yet. And she's not stupid, gee. She'll catch on if we push too hard. No one's going to push, came Tessa's voice, cool and rehearsed. We just need to get the information right. She's lonely. She needs companionship. There are too many memories in that house. A new place is a new life. It's for her own good. For her own good, Noel echoed with a grin in his voice. Let's call things by their proper names. We want to sell the house while she's still able to sign the papers and split the money. Noel, Muriel hissed, clearly caught off guard by his bluntness. What? It's true. We've been dancing around it for 6 months. G wants startup capital for his business. You want to send Lillian to private school. Neither of us can afford it without Mom's money. It's not just her money, Gar said quietly but firmly. Dad earned that too. It's for the family. She's just the steward, and she's clinging to it like it's her last breath. Begging every time like we're asking for alms, Tessa added, venom lacing her voice. It's humiliating. She gives us money when we ask, Muriel countered, sounding half-hearted. At the drop of a hat, Tessa snorted. I stood frozen, the blood draining from my face. They were discussing my house, my finances, my life, as though I were already dead. Or incapable. Or both. What if she doesn't agree? Noel asked. She will, Gar replied confidently. I've already spoken to a lawyer. If necessary, we can initiate proceedings to declare her partially incapacitated. My heart thudded. A slow, cold terror seeped into my chest. She forgets things, confuses dates, Gar continued. That's normal at her age. That's not grounds for declaring her unfit, Muriel objected, but her voice was laced with doubt. It might be enough for a court to appoint a guardian, Gar insisted, especially if a doctor confirms the early signs of dementia. What doctor? Muriel sounded incredulous. Dr. Rodriguez, Gar replied. An old friend. He's agreed to help if needed. That's wrong, G. Muriel said, but she no longer sounded certain. She's our mother. A mother who was too busy with her career to notice us, Gar snapped, who bought us off with gifts and missed every important moment of our lives. She made her choices. Now it's our turn. There was a long silence, then a weary sigh from Muriel. Okay, but let's try the easy way first. She's always wanted the best for us. Maybe if you explain how important it is. Already tried. Tessa cut in. He's been hinting for months. Every time. She stalls. Promises to think about it. Enough waiting. We need to act. Now. While she's still alive, Noel added coldly. Before things get complicated. Tessa corrected him smoothly. The plan is simple, Guy explained. We convince her that moving is best. We find a decent retirement community, something mid-range. Not too expensive. Not too cheap. I've already found a buyer for the house. A colleague's been eyeing properties in this area. The offer's more than fair. After selling the house and paying for the new place, there'll be plenty left over, Noel said. We split it evenly. Some for you, some for us, Tessa added. What about her bank accounts? Noel asked. One step at a time, Gar said. The house first. Once she's settled, We'll talk about managing her finances. Set up a family trust, maybe. She'll never agree to give up control of her money, Mariel warned. If necessary, we revisit the guardianship option, Gus said flatly. I hope it doesn't come to that. She's a reasonable woman. She'll see it's best for everyone. I listened in silence, my world collapsing around me, my face wet with tears I didn't remember shedding. My own children. Planning to take my home. My money. Possibly even my freedom. All wrapped in the thin veneer of concern and care. I stood there, shattered, but quiet. They couldn't know I'd heard. Not yet. I needed time. Strategy. Resolve. I wiped my tears, fixed my face in the mirror, and descended the stairs with the most practiced smile I'd ever worn. So, I said, stepping into the living room, shall we talk about the future? They turned to me with plastic smiles, unaware that the masks they wore had already been torn away. The game had begun, but now I knew the rules. For the next 2 hours, I played along. I asked questions, listened to their pitches, commented on brochures, all the while watching them. Every glance, every wince, every insincere nod. I noticed Tessa's subtle recoil when I touched her arm. Noel's stifled yawn when I mentioned my plans for the garden. The silent glances passed between Gar and Mariel when they thought I wasn't looking. These signs had always been there, but I had chosen not to see them. Now that the veil was lifted, they were glaringly obvious. I need time to think, I said, finally, when the conversation ran dry. This is a big decision. Of course, Mom, Gar said, patting my arm. But don't drag it out. A good option could slip away. When they left, promising to return in 2 weeks, I stood by the window and watched the driveway slowly empty. Gar's voice echoed in my mind. She chose her job over us. Now it's our turn to choose. Maybe he was right. I did choose my career. I did miss things. But does that justify what they are doing now? That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, retracing every step that brought us here. Where had I failed as a mother? What should I have done differently? Most importantly, what do I do now? By morning, I had made up my mind. If my children had declared a quiet war, I wasn't going down without a fight. I've always been a fighter. That's how I became one of the first female cardiologists in the country. How I survived hospital politics, sexism, and endless nights on call. How I built the very fortune they now wanted to seize. For the first time in years, I felt the sharp, steady thrum of determination. I opened my closet and pulled out an old notebook. It contained names, former colleagues, trusted patients, friends in high places, allies. It had been a week since that unforgettable weekend. I chose not to confront them immediately. Instead, I acted interested, asked for more brochures, sent Gar articles I'd found on upscale retirement complexes, asked careful questions, observed, and what I saw only confirmed my fears. Their smiles were too wide, their words too rehearsed, the warmth, manufactured. On Wednesday, Mariel called to invite me to lunch over the weekend. Just a family dinner, Mom. Nothing special. Noel will make his famous steak. I accepted, even though I suspected it was another staged intervention. Mariel never invited me just because. There was always an agenda. On Saturday, I arrived at their suburban home by 2 in the afternoon. The house was nice, predictable. 2 stories, trim lawn, garden statues, just enough shine to keep up appearances. Mom, you look great. Mariel greeted me with a smile she'd likely practiced in the mirror. I returned the gesture, cataloguing every insincere syllable. Inside, Gar and Tessa were already seated, making themselves at home. My suspicion deepened. This wasn't lunch. It was a summit. Then, from across the room, a light, Lillian. Sweet, genuine, 11-year-old Lillian, Mariel's daughter, the only person in that house whose love felt untainted. Grandma, she cried, rushing into my arms. Hi, sunshine, I said, hugging her, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Guess what? I got an A in biology. The teacher says I have a talent for science. Just like you. I pulled a small velvet box from my purse. Then this is for you. She opened it and gasped. Silver earrings, delicate and shimmering. They're beautiful. Thank you, Grandma. Mom, you're spoiling her, Mariel muttered, but I caught the edge in her voice. Not maternal concern, envy. Lunch passed under a suffocating blanket of politeness. We discussed the weather, Lillian's school, Gar's exciting new business venture. But not the house, not the move, not until later. After dessert, Noel suggested I play chess with Lillian while they cleaned up. This was strange. Noel never engaged unless required. I suspected a diversion. Still, I agreed. Lillian loved chess, and I wouldn't deny her the pleasure. We settled in the living room. The kitchen door remained ajar. Apparently, they assumed that clinking dishes and running water would shield their words. But this house has incredible acoustics, and I still have the ears of a cardiologist trained to detect whispers and heartbeats. So when do we tell her? Gar's voice drifted in. After Lillian goes to do her homework, Mariel said. Do you think she'll agree? Tessa asked. She should, Gar replied. Jeff's already got the paperwork ready. Just needs her signature. Jeff? Who was Jeff? I moved a pawn across the board, keeping my face calm, but inside, the war had begun in earnest. What if she says no? I could hear the tension in Mariel's voice. Then we go to Plan B, she asked, not quite believing she was saying it aloud. Gar's voice dropped, but not low enough to escape the reach of the old vent. Jeff says that with Dr. Rodriguez's report and our documentation of her forgetfulness, the court can appoint a temporary guardian. It could be me. Or you. As next of kin. That's too much. Gee, Mariel replied, clearly shaken. Convincing her to sell the house is one thing. But this? Declaring her unfit? No one's talking about full incapacitation, Gus said, his tone clipped. Just financial guardianship. She'll still be able to make other decisions, except those related to money. Exactly, Tessa interjected. Just the finances. Gus sounded pleased with her support. Look, Mariel, we've had this discussion. Her accounts are just sitting there. She only uses the interest. The principal's untouched. It's completely unsustainable. It's her money, Mariel shot back, growing more unsure with every word. She and Dad earned it. For their future. 4 hours, yes, but... They always said they were working for us, Gar snapped. Well, the future is here. I want to open a clinic. You want Lillian to go to a better school. What's wrong with that? Nothing. But... No buts. Gar cut her off. Are you with me or not? If not, I'll do it all myself. But then don't expect a share. There was a long pause, the kind that splits a family across a fragile line. Then Mariel exhaled. I'm with you, she said reluctantly. But we try the easy way first. Maybe she'll agree. Sure, Gar replied, calming down. We'll offer her a mutually beneficial solution. She sells the house, moves to a retirement complex, and we place the remaining funds, and some of her savings, into a family trust. I manage it. All fair. All open. And if she asks why you and not her? Tessa asked. Tell her it's safer, Gus said, unfazed. She's at risk of being scammed at her age. It's for her own protection. He'd clearly rehearsed the speech. Every word was polished, weaponized with just enough faux concern to mask the greed underneath. Your move, Grandma, Lillian's voice interrupted my thoughts, yanking me back to the chessboard in front of me. The pieces were a blur. I couldn't tell pawns from bishops. My heart was pounding so loud I was surprised she couldn't hear it. Are you okay? She asked, concern clouding her big, curious eyes. I forced a smile. Of course, sunshine. Just thinking carefully about my next move. And I was, just not on the chessboard. They had moved on in the kitchen, talking about Lillian's upcoming school event, as if nothing momentous had just passed between them. But I'd heard enough. I lost the game deliberately, letting Lillian beam at her small victory. When we returned to the table for tea, the moment I'd anticipated and dreaded finally arrived. Mom, Gar began, his tone saccharine, we wanted to talk about something we mentioned last week. About selling the house. I decided not to let them ease into it. Yes, I said calmly, about selling my house. Ga blinked, surprised by my bluntness. Right. Well, we found a great option for you. Golden Autumn Retirement Complex. Not too expensive, but with great medical support and all the modern amenities. He placed a glossy brochure in front of me. On the cover, silver-haired seniors laughed around a putting green, framed by fake sunshine and photoshopped landscaping. And the other day, he continued, I got a call from my colleague, Adam Brenton. Remember him? He's been looking to buy in your neighborhood. He's very interested. Said he'd make a good offer. What kind of offer? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Ga named a number. It was well below market value. I paused, feigning interest. And what exactly do you propose to do with the money left over after paying for this new retirement paradise? Ga and Mariel exchanged a look before Ga continued. Well, we were thinking of setting up a family trust. For better capital management. I'd oversee it. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't know you were into investments. I've had a few successes, Ga said confidently. But I caught it. Tessa's subtle wince, her barely concealed grimace. The important thing, Ga went on, is that this way your money is protected and working, for you and the family. For your comfort, for my clinic, and for Lillian's school. I see, I said. So, this money would go toward your business. And private school for Lillian. They stiffened. The mask of charm cracked. What's there to think about? Tessa interjected, irritation tightening her voice. You sell a house that's too big for you, move into a comfortable apartment with services, and the leftover money helps your kids. Everybody wins. If it's so simple, I said slowly, why didn't you just tell me that from the start? Why the secret meetings, the plans to declare me incapacitated? It's a last resort, G admitted. Just in case you refuse to be reasonable. Reasonable? I echoed. You think it's reasonable for me to hand over control of my entire estate? Not to us, G said quickly. To the family. The money will still be yours, technically. We'll just manage it more efficiently. I looked at them, my children and their spouses. Did they even believe the things they were saying, or were these lies they told themselves to justify their betrayal? I couldn't be sure. I should go home, I said, rising from the table. Mom, wait, Mariel tried, reaching for my hand. We're not done talking. We're done for today. I picked up my bag and turned toward the door. I'll let you know my decision. Before I left, I stopped to say goodbye to Lillian. She was seated at her desk, hunched over her homework. When she looked up and saw me, her expression brightened. Are you leaving already, Grandma? Yes, Sunshine. I have a few things to take care of. You look sad, she said softly. Is something wrong? Children always see what adults try to hide. I smiled. Just tired, sweetheart. But I'm fine. Come again soon. She wrapped her arms around me. I love it when you come. I will. I kissed her head, breathing in the warm, fruity scent of her shampoo, then left. The drive home passed in a blur, my hands gripping the wheel as my mind ran in circles. Plan B, Dr. Rodriguez. Guardianship. My own children were plotting to take away my rights, my freedom, under the disguise of concern. Once home, I headed straight to my computer. There was no more time for indecision. I had to act. I began with research, financial guardianship, elder rights, court procedures. Then I called Eleanor Parker, a former patient, a loyal friend, and now a renowned patient advocate. Nora, I said as soon as she answered. I need your help. Dee, she responded, using the same nickname Owen once used. What's wrong? I told her everything. Their quiet scheming, the overheard conversations, the manipulated trust, the attempt to sell my home without fair value. Bastards, Eleanor said flatly. I'm sorry, Dee, but they are. How can they do this to you? I'm partly to blame, I admitted. I've solved every problem with money for so long they don't see me as a person anymore, just an ATM with a heart. That doesn't excuse what they're doing, she said firmly. So what are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. Right now I'm just stalling. Told them I'm thinking about the house. That's not good enough, Eleanor said. If they are serious, they could move fast, especially if they have a doctor willing to claim early dementia. What do you suggest? First, get a full medical evaluation from someone you trust. Establish that your cognitive health is excellent. That'll be your shield. I nodded. She was right. I needed documentation. And another thing, she added. You need information. Real information. About what they are planning. About this lawyer, Jeff. About the buyer. And their financial situations. You may not know the full extent of the pressure they are under. How do I find out? Hire a private investigator, she said, matter of fact. A detective. I hesitated. To spy on my own children. You're not spying, she said gently. You're protecting yourself. You need the truth before they take action. I know someone, Roy Taylor. Discreet. Efficient. Ex-cop. He handles things like this quietly. There was a pause, but then I remembered the kitchen conversation. The legal schemes. The way they spoke as if I were already gone. I clenched my jaw. All right, I said. Give me his contact. I told him everything. About the attempted sale, the forged trust plans, the shady lawyer Jeff, and Dr. Rodriguez. I need to know what they are really up to, I concluded. And how deep they are in. Roy nodded, scribbling in a small notebook. I'll check their finances, background on the lawyer, any legal documents being prepared, and this potential buyer, see if he even exists. How long will that take? For a basic sweep, 2 to 3 weeks. Deeper, maybe more. I shook my head. We don't have that long. They're expecting a decision on the house. If I stall, they might escalate. He nodded. Then I'll prioritize the lawyer and the doctor. That should tell us how serious this is. We agreed on a price. As he got up to leave, he paused at the door. Mrs. Ashbrook, he said quietly, are you sure you want to know the truth? Sometimes it's easier not to. I looked him square in the eye. I've dealt with truth my entire life, Mr. Taylor. As a cardiologist, you learn to read between the beats, listen for what others miss. I won't stop now. He nodded once. Then I'll be in touch. Meanwhile, I pursued other avenues. I arranged a full neurological evaluation with Dr. Howard Stein, a brilliant mind and a trusted friend. I contacted my financial advisor and lawyer to review my accounts, legal documents, and any active powers of attorney. I didn't know how this story would end, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to surrender quietly. If my children wanted a war, then I would fight, and they would learn that I was stronger than they remembered. 2 weeks passed in a fog of phone calls, polite texts, fake smiles, and feigned interest in retirement brochures. I played the role of a cooperative, aging mother while inside I was wound like a wire. Then, finally, Roy called. I have something, he said. Can I come by tonight? At exactly 7, he arrived, carrying a thick folder, the kind no digital file could ever fully replace. He looked grave. Please, I said, leading him in. Have a seat. No tea, thank you, he said. He placed the folder gently on the table. What I've found, it's not easy. I'm ready, I said. Just tell me. Roy opened the folder. Let's start with your son. As you suspected, his finances are a mess. Over the last 3 years, he made several bad investments. First in a biotech startup that went under, then in the stock market, trying to recover his losses. Instead, he racked up debt. A cold dread curled in my stomach. How much? Roughly $400,000. Most of it in high-interest loans, some nearing default. I swallowed hard. That's significant, but not impossible. I could have helped. There's more, Roy said, flipping to the next page. 8 months ago, G took out a personal loan for $120,000 in your name. What? My voice cracked. He used your medical power of attorney, the one you signed during your knee surgery 3 years ago. He used that to access personal records and forged your signature on a financial document. I felt dizzy. I remember the moment, the pain, the anesthesia, the hurried paperwork. And I trusted him. My son. I was unconscious, I murmured, stunned. I never thought he'd use it to get a loan in my name. That's fraud. Yes, Roy nodded gravely. It's a criminal offense. From the looks of it, his wife Tessa doesn't even know. She believes their financial problems are manageable. He's been shielding her from the worst of it. I shook my head slowly, absorbing the blow. How could G do this? Had he truly been so desperate? Or had he simply assumed he could get away with it? What about Mariel and Noel? I asked, dreading the next revelation. Roy flipped through the file and pulled out another document. Noel's situation is quieter, but no less serious. He works as chief accountant at a mid-sized construction firm. Based on the financial reports I accessed, he's been altering figures, manipulating the statements. Manipulating? I echoed, feeling a wave of nausea rising. Forging, Roy said bluntly, to hide the company's deteriorating financial state from investors. A serious financial crime. My mouth went dry. Noel, the quiet, meticulous Noel who always offered to wash the dishes after dinner, was falsifying corporate books? I closed my eyes. It was as if I'd been living among strangers. And Mariel? I forced myself to ask. Roy exhaled, his expression shifting into one of caution. Your daughter has been actively cultivating an image of your mental decline. I reached out to several people you both know, neighbors, friends, old colleagues. They all confirmed Mariel had been telling them you were forgetful, confused, increasingly paranoid. She told Dr. Martin that she was worried about early-onset dementia and asked for a recommendation. I felt the color drain from my face. So this was it. Not just financial desperation or a misguided attempt to help me, this was a campaign. My own daughter was laying the groundwork to declare me unfit. Does she have serious financial issues? I asked, working to steady my voice. Not as severe as GS, Roy said, but she and Noel are heavily in debt. Their credit card balances are high, and they've committed to a private school for Lillian that they simply can't afford. Their salaries, Mariel's as a teacher, Noel's mid-level accountant income, don't support that kind of spending. Of course, they'd always tried to keep up with G and Tessa, and now the mask was slipping. What about that lawyer? Jeffrey Coleman, Roy replied, sliding a photo from the folder. Partner at Coleman and Dayton. He specializes in family law, particularly guardianship for incapacitated adults. He has a reputation. Unofficially, he's known for helping adult children take legal control of their elderly parents' assets. I stared at the photo of the graying man with a hard, hawk-like stare. And he's working with G. Yes, Roy confirmed. My source at the firm told me Coleman is assembling the necessary paperwork to apply for financial guardianship. The plan is to file within the month, unless you agree to surrender control voluntarily. And the doctor, Rodriguez? I asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez, Roy said, flipping to another page. Psychiatrist. Private practice. He and G went to college together. He's already drafted a preliminary report suggesting signs of cognitive decline. He's never met me, I snapped, furious. Exactly, Roy agreed. It's a gross violation of medical ethics, but it may hold up in court at the early stages. Courts sometimes appoint a temporary guardian based on initial documentation, just until a full evaluation is done. My anger surged. Lies. All of it. They were trying to steal my life with whispers and paperwork. Is there anything else? I asked. My voice sounded calm, but my hands trembled. Roy hesitated. Yes. It's about your daughter-in-law, Tessa. I sighed heavily. What now? According to my sources, Roy said carefully, she's having an affair with GS boss, Richard Jenkins. It's been going on for about a year. My breath caught. She's cheating on G. Yes. But more than that, she's using the relationship to secure GS advancement. Jenkins recently recommended G for a promotion, even though others were more qualified. It's created tension in the office, and though G seems unaware, people are starting to suspect. I leaned back in my chair, the folder still open before me like a grim puzzle with each piece more damning than the last. My son, a fraud who had stolen my identity for a loan. My daughter, a saboteur painting me as senile. My son-in-law, an embezzler. My daughter-in-law, a manipulative adulteress trading her integrity for influence. And all of them, working together to rob me of my freedom. What are you going to do with this information, Mrs. Ashbrook? Roy asked after a long silence. It was a good question. What was I going to do? Go to the police? File charges against my own children? Drag our family into public scandal? Every option felt like a blade. Cutting. Final. I don't know yet, I said finally. But I need proof. Undeniable proof. Roy nodded. I've gathered almost everything you'll need. Recordings, documents, witness statements. Some of it wouldn't hold in court, but it's more than enough to confront them or persuade them to back off. He slid a heavy folder across the table. It's all here. If you need more, anything specific, I can get it. I took the folder in my hands. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. You've done more for me than you know. After he left, I stayed awake the entire night, poring over every document, every photograph, every transcribed conversation. A copy of the forged loan with my signature, my name, but not my handwriting. GS bank statements, riddled with failed investments and debt notices. Audio files of Mariel describing me as paranoid and forgetful. Surveillance photos of Tessa walking out of a hotel arm in arm with Jenkins. Noel's altered financial statements, red marks indicating where numbers had been inflated or hidden. Every single page shattered something inside me. The grief was immense, but it was no longer paralyzing. By dawn, something colder and sharper had settled in me, resolve. That morning, I called Eleanor. Nora, I said, I need your help again. Dee, what happened? She asked, voice tight with concern. I got the report from Roy, I said. It's worse than I thought. I summarized the key findings. She didn't interrupt, just listened, absorbing the horror. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, but I need legal advice. Not for litigation, for protection. I know the perfect person, she said immediately. Martha Livingston. She's a former neighbor of mine, specializes in elder law, estate planning, and defense against financial abuse. If anyone can help, it's her. I thanked Eleanor, wrote down the contact info, then made another call to my financial advisor, David Goldman. David, I said, can we meet today? It's urgent. Of course, Dr. Ashbrook. What's going on? I saw GS' expression freeze. He reached for the wine glass with a shaky hand. The video continued. Spliced phone recordings, discrete video snippets, financial documents scanned and highlighted. Roy's work had been meticulous. The screen displayed the forged loan application G had signed using my medical power of attorney. I zoomed in on the signature and then cut to a document I'd written declaring it unauthorized, dated and notarized. Then came the bank records, GS failed investments, the debt statements, and finally a red, bold figure, minus $407,000. The room was silent. G looked pale. Next came Mariel, her voice echoing through hidden recordings as she told neighbors about my budding dementia, how I was forgetting basic things, becoming paranoid. The screen showed text messages she'd sent to Dr. Martin, suggesting an urgent psychiatric evaluation. Mariel covered her mouth, eyes wide. Noel was next. The screen displayed financial spreadsheets from his company with annotated alterations, side-by-side comparisons of the forged and actual records. At the bottom of the screen was a flashing phrase, financial fraud, federal offense. Noel was now visibly sweating. Then came the photos. Tessa and Richard Jenkins, exiting a hotel together. Again, and again, multiple angles, different nights. A timestamp at the corner of each. One showed her kissing him on the cheek as he opened her car door. G turned to stare at her. What the hell is this? He asked, his voice low and sharp. Tessa said nothing. Her lipstick-slicked mouth remained frozen, her eyes never leaving the screen. The final slide was a photo of me and Owen, our wedding day. I had placed it deliberately. It faded out slowly to text that read, "You raised your voices before asking for mine. You tried to take from me before you asked what I wanted to give. This was never about care, it was about control. Let this be your lesson." The lights came back on. Silence. No one moved. G stared at the now blank screen as if it might rewind itself and vanish. Mariel's lip trembled. Noel had his head down, rubbing his temples. Tessa smoothed her dress but didn't meet anyone's gaze. Why? I asked softly, breaking the silence. Why didn't any of you just talk to me? Why didn't you ask? G opened his mouth. Closed it. Finally, he managed. You wouldn't have given it. Not enough. You always made us feel like we owed you. Because I did, I said, suddenly sharp. Because everything I gave came with effort, sacrifice, time stolen from your childhood so you could have food, a roof, an education. I gave you what I had, even if it wasn't always what you needed. And maybe I failed in that way. But I never tried to take from you. Not like this. Mariel stood up. Mom, we were scared. About you. About the money. G made it sound reasonable. I cut in. Sound like it was your duty to help me lose everything I built, hand it over without protest. You were all so busy planning for what I might become, you never once asked who I still am. G stood too. This is revenge. This is a lesson, I replied coolly. One I hope you never forget. I'm not going to the police. I'm not suing. That would ruin you, and despite everything, I don't want that. I want you to think about what you've become. And what it cost you. They said nothing. You said you were thinking of my good, I added, rising from my seat. So here's what's good for me. I've sold the house. I've bought a place in Naples. I've secured my accounts. The inheritance. Locked behind conditions none of you can meet unless you prove you've changed. And me. I smiled. I'm moving on. I turned to leave but paused. You're free to call me. Visit me. Be part of my life. But I'll no longer be manipulated, guilt, or gaslighted. The next move is yours. With that, I walked out of the restaurant, head held high. The night air greeted me like an old friend, warm and full of quiet freedom. I felt lighter, not because the betrayal had vanished, but because I had faced it, called it by name, and refused to let it define me. It was, after all, my birthday. And this year, the gift was mine. I pretended not to understand. Well, the condo in Florida will be worth less than your current house, G began cautiously, carefully choosing his words. There will be a significant amount of money left over. Yes, I confirmed, nodding slowly, very significant. My realtor says the house could sell for around $2.5 million. The condo I'm considering is about $800,000. I watched the numbers land like gold coins in their imaginations. G's eyes gleamed with calculations, already dividing the surplus in his head. Mariel smiled faintly, probably dreaming of Lillian's private school tuition being paid in full. Tessa, tipsy and less guarded, let the greedy hunger flash in her expression, raw and unfiltered. I've been thinking about setting up a family trust, I continued, using their own earlier suggestions as bait. For better capital management. Great idea, G said instantly, the eagerness leaking through his polished tone. I could help with the organization. I've got experience in investments. Yes, I remember you mentioning your successful investments, I replied with a hint of irony. He didn't catch it. When do you plan to sell the house? He asked, moving quickly to the next point. Soon. Very soon, I said with calm certainty. There's already a potential buyer. Adam Brenton. G asked, packing up. My colleague I mentioned. No, I cut in smoothly. Another man offered a better price. I saw the flicker of disappointment flash across G's face. So, he'd had a deal in place, likely a kickback arranged with Brenton to undervalue the house. Too bad for him the game was changing. And what about the rest of the money? Tessa interrupted, her voice slightly slurred but her intent clear. The money in your accounts, Mariel added, glancing at her sister-in-law with alarm, trying to rein her in, but it was too late. What accounts? Tessa? I asked, feigning confusion. I don't recall discussing my finances with you. Tessa flushed. Well, your savings, she stammered, gathering herself quickly. G told me you had substantial funds in investment accounts. Really? I turned to my son, eyebrows raised. And how does G know that? I don't recall confiding in him about the state of my finances. G blushed, clearly caught off guard. I assumed. Given your and Dad's careers. I just thought. I see, I said simply. Well, yes, I do have savings. And I've also been thinking about how to use them. The table tensed, everyone hanging on my next words like gamblers at the edge of a final bet. I'm thinking of starting a charitable foundation, I announced, watching their faces twitch in disbelief, to support low-income medical students. As you know, medical school is getting more expensive, and many talented young people can't afford the education. The reaction was immediate and vivid. G's jaw tightened. Mariel's face sagged, her lips parting slightly. Tessa stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. All the capital? G asked, voice strained. A considerable portion, I replied carefully. Of course, I'll leave enough for a comfortable life, and for the grandchildren. Their education is important. What about us? Tessa snapped, no longer able to mask her fury. Your own children. What about you? I returned, voice still calm. You're adults. Self-sufficient. You have stable careers. Good professions. But we have needs, Tessa said, her voice rising. G wants to open a clinic. Mariel wants a private school for Lillian. And you're going to give it all away to strangers. Tessa, please. G tried to calm her, but it was futile. The alcohol and her resentment were in full control now. No. I'm done pretending, she barked. We've waited years. Put up with your arrogance, your rules. Pretended we didn't care about the money. And now you're giving it away. Tessa, enough. Mariel said, trying to keep her own temper under control. Mom has the right to do what she wants with her money. Shut up, Tessa spat, turning on her. You've done nothing but talk about how you'd spend your share. How Mom's becoming unstable. Don't play the saint now. I watched it unfold, strangely serene. The masks had dropped. Finally, this was their truth, naked and ugly. Tessa, stop, G snapped, grabbing her wrist. You're ruining everything. There's nothing to ruin, she shouted, yanking her arm away. Your mother has been playing us. All that talk about selling the house, about the trust, it was all a ruse. She was never going to share it. That's not true, I said coolly, standing up. I am selling the house, and I am setting up a trust, just not the one you were hoping for. See? Tessa barked. I told you. She only ever cared about herself and her damn career. Tessa, that's enough. G thundered. You're drunk. Yes, I'm drunk, she laughed bitterly. Drunk enough to say what I've always wanted to say. I've hated her since day one. Her airs, her attitude, her superiority. I've only ever tolerated her for money. We all have. The silence that followed was deafening. Mariel covered her mouth. Noel stared into his plate. G looked like someone had struck him. Thank you, Tessa, I said, straightening my shawl. For your honesty. And since we're sharing truths. I turned toward the waiter, who had been quietly waiting at the door. With a discreet nod, the lights dimmed. A hidden screen descended. G stood, panic in his eyes. What is this? He asked. A birthday surprise, I said, my voice clear. A little presentation. About our family. The screen lit up with the title, Ashbrook Family Secrets. Then came the first slide, GS professional portrait. Then the forged loan agreement with my signature, his investment losses, his spiraling debts. He turned pale. Tessa stared. You forged a loan in her name? She asked, horrified. I can explain. G tried, but then Mariel's face appeared on screen. The recordings. The emails. Her attempts to have me declared legally incompetent. Noel, she whispered, turning to her husband. His own records were next. Financial statement forgeries, red flags, illegal corrections. Fraud. Then Tessa. Hotel photos. Her and Jenkins. Kisses. Restaurant meetings. And a phone recording. Her voice laughing as she described how the affair was helping G.'s career. You're a whore, G hissed, standing and staring at her. And you're a thief, she shot back. That's enough, Mariel cried. Turn it off, please. I gestured toward the waiter. The screen retracted. The room remained in dead silence. Now you know, I said softly. The truth. About yourselves. About each other. How did you? G began. I hired a private investigator, I said. After I overheard your little conversation about Plan B and Dr. Rodriguez's conclusion. About how you were going to incapacitate me if I didn't cooperate. None of them spoke. Shame clung to the air like thick smoke. What now? Mariel asked at last, her voice shaking. Are you going to press charges? No, I said. You're my children. I don't want to see you in court or prison. I just want you to understand. I know. I'm not senile. I'm not weak. I see you for who you've become. But what about the inheritance? Noel asked. I'm really selling the house, I said. I'm really moving to Florida. And I've already set up the foundation. Most of my fortune will go to underprivileged students pursuing medical education. You're disinheriting us. G looked wounded. Not entirely, I replied gently. Each of you will receive something. And the grandchildren's education is provided for. But the rest? No. The money has poisoned us. It turned my family into predators. I wanted to do good, not harm. I picked up my bag and shawl. You're just going to leave? G asked, still stunned. After all this? Yes, I said, heading toward the door. The bill is paid. You can stay and talk. Maybe even reflect. I paused before stepping out. I loved you, I added. Always, even when I was too busy working to say it. Even now, after everything. I hope one day you'll realize some things, dignity, trust, love, can't be bought. And then I left. Quietly, with grace. Outside, the evening air wrapped around me like a blessing. It wasn't just the end of a dinner. It was the beginning of my freedom. My new life in Florida awaited. A fresh chapter, unburdened by betrayal, unbound by manipulation. And this time, I was writing the story.